the Grand Master of Demonic Cultivation. Extra Chapter, Incense Burner, Part 1. Wei Wuxian found an old incense burner in the treasure pavilion of the Cloud Recesses, the Chamber of Ancients. The incense burner had the body of a bear, nose of an elephant, eyes of a rhinoceros, tail of a bull, and limbs of a tiger. With its stomach as the main unit, it spouted soft smoke from its mouth after the incense was lit up. In the Jingxi, Wei Wuxian played with it for a while. This thing looks kind of fun. It's got no killing intent or malicious energy, so it's definitely not something used to harm people. Lanzan, do you know what this is for? Lan Wangji shook his head. Wei Wuxian sniffed the scent. He didn't find anything wrong with it either. Since neither of the two saw it as suspicious, they put the incense burner away and decided to investigate it further at some later date. Yet before the two had laid down for long, they felt extremely tired and fell into a deep sleep. An unknown period of time later, Wei Wuxian woke up and discovered that he and Lan Wangji weren't at the Jingxi of the Cloud Recesses, but rather amidst the wilderness of a forest. Wei Wuxian crawled up from the ground. What's this place? Lan Wangji, not the real world. Wei Wuxian, not the real world? No way, he shook his sleeve, feeling it quite clearly. What could this be if not reality? Lan Wangji didn't answer. He walked in silence towards the river and gestured for him to look down. Wei Wuxian walked over and glanced at his reflection. He was immediately startled. Reflected against the river's surface was how he looked in his past life. Wei Wuxian immediately looked up, because of the incense burner? Lan Wangji nodded, likely so. After staring for a while at the familiar features in the water, Wei Wuxian finally averted his gaze. It's fine. I tested the incense burner. There's no resentful energy, so it's definitely not a weapon of evil. Some master probably made this either to cultivate or just for the sake of amusement. Let's walk around for now and look into our situation. And the two began to stroll within this forest that was an illusion or otherwise. Soon, a small, log cabin came into their view. Wei Wuxian saw the log cabin and exclaimed with a huh. Lan Wangji, yes? Wei Wuxian scrutinized the cabin. The cabin looks a little familiar to me. The cabin was a home that looked more than common, which was why even though he was suspicious, he couldn't determine if he'd seen it or not. At this point, the squeaks of the loom came from the cabin. The two exchanged a glance with each other. Without more words, they approached together. But at the door of the cabin, as they looked inside, both of them stopped in surprise. What was within the cabin was far from even the worst-case scenario they imagined. There were neither villains nor beasts. In fact, there was only one person, and a person they were both rather familiar with, at that. In the cabin sat a Lan Wangji. This Lan Wangji had the same handsome features and the same tall build as the one beside Wei Wuxian. The plain yet not at all crude garb of blue and white cotton, when over his body, seemed to become the heavenly robes of a renowned cultivator. At the side, the loom moved on its own like it was maneuvered using a spell, squeaking as it weaved cotton. On the other hand, he himself sat at the side with a book in his hand, reading attentively. The two had already walked in front of the door and even made quite some noise, while Lan Wangji seemed as though he didn't notice anything. With a distant expression, he flipped over a page with fair, slim fingers. Wei Wuxian looked at the Lan Wangji beside him, then at the Lan Wangji inside, reaching an epiphany. I see, I see. Lan Wangji's brows raised just a bit. The slight motion meant that he was surprised. He asked, what? Wei Wuxian, this is my dream. Before he finished, a slender figure clothed in black swept into the cabin, extending his speech, I'm back. Looking at the beaming Wei Wuxian who carried a hoe on his shoulder, a creel in his hand, and a straw in his mouth, Lan Wangji was even more silent. If this was Wei Wuxian's dream, it was only natural that the people inside the dream couldn't see them. The weaving Lan Wangji finally looked up. When he saw Wei Wuxian, he even curled his lips slightly, but the smile faded at once. He stood up and poured him a cup of water. Wei Wuxian spat out the straw in his mouth and sat down at the wooden little table, grabbing the cup and downing it in a few gulps. He finally began, "Today the sun's way too bright outside. I'm absolutely scorched. I left the things at the field. Not gonna work anymore. Maybe I'll pick it up again later." Lan Wangji replied, "Amen." Then he took out a snowy towel and handed it to him. Wei Wuxian, however, moved his face over with a grin. It was more than obvious that he wanted Lan Wangji to wipe his face for him. And Lan Wangji didn't refuse either. He really began to wipe his face, earnest and dedicated. Wei Wuxian enjoyed it as he rambled on, "I played around over at the river and got 2 fish. Cook me fish stew tonight, Arjij." Amen. How are crucians usually cooked over at Gusu? Do you know how to cook chili pickled fish, Lanzan? I like that. But please don't make it sweet. I tried it once and almost threw up. Amen. I do. The weather's getting hotter and hotter. There's no need to boil the bath water so hot today, so I only cut half the usual amount of firewood. Amen. That is fine. Lan Wangji stared at the two making casual conversation. Your dream? Wei Wuxian was laughing so hard he might suffer from an internal injury. Yes. For a certain period of time, for some reason, I keep on having these dreams. I dream that we retire to seclusion to the countryside. I go out to hunt and farm, while you stay at home to guard the house, weaving and cooking food for me. Oh right, you're also in charge of my money and doing accounts for me. At night you even mend my clothes. Every time I dream about telling you to boil the bath water so that we could bathe together at night, but every time we were about to take off our clothes I'd wake up. What a shame, ha 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 ha. He didn't at all feel embarrassed that such a dream was seen by Lan Wangji. Instead, he was quite pleased with himself. Seeing how giddy he was, Lan Wangji's eyes grew soft, one might as well. This dream of Wei Wuxian's was full of trivial odds and ends, like cooking, eating, feeding chicken, cutting firewood. As expected, when the bath water had finished boiling, the dream halted abruptly. The two walked just a few steps out of the cabin and arrived at an elegant pavilion. Outside stood a magnolia tree with branches drawn out, effusing a quiet, refreshing fragrance. The dream's location changed, this time somewhere both of the two should definitely recognize. This place was the library pavilion of Gusu's cloud recesses. Candlelight leaked out a wooden window on the second floor, along with indistinct voices. Wei Wuxian looked up. Let's go inside and check things out? For some reason, Lan Wangji had surprisingly stopped. He stared at the window, lost in thought, as if he was hesitating. Wei Wuxian found this strange. He couldn't think of a reason why Lan Wangji might not want to go in, asking, "What's wrong?" Lan Wangji shook his head vaguely. After some silence, just as he was about to speak, a string of unrestrained laughter suddenly exploded from within the library pavilion. Hearing this, Wei Wuxian's eyes lit up. He dashed into the pavilion and leapt up the stairs in just a few strides. Now that he entered, of course Lan Wangji wouldn't stay outside all by himself either, so he went in as well. Together, the two walked into the lamplit chamber, and they indeed saw something very interesting. On a light-colored sitting mat beside a surface set for the punishment of copying scriptures, a 16-year-old Wei Ying was roaring with laughter as he slammed the desk. Ha 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 ha. Thrown onto the ground was a yellowing booklet, which a similarly young Lanzan treated as if it were a snake or scorpion. He had already backed away up to a corner of the pavilion, currently howling in anger. Wei Ying. Young Wei Ying laughed so hard he almost rolled under his deck. He finally managed to raise his hand. Here. I'm here. And over here, Wei Wuxian was also splitting his sides with laughter. He tugged at Lan Wangji who stood beside him. What a nice dream. I can't anymore, Lanzan, look at you, look at how you were back then, that expression, ha 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 ha. For some reason, Lan Wangji's face looked even stranger. Wei Wuxian pulled him over to sit on a mat at the side, grinning as their adolescent versions fought and argued, propping his chin on his hand. There, young Lanzon had already unsheathed Baiken. Wei Wuxian hurriedly grabbed Suobian, revealing a few inches of its sheath as he reminded, "Manners. Second young Master Lan. Watch your manners. I brought my sword today as well. If we start fighting, do you think your library pavilion will end up fine?" Lanzon raged, "Wei Ying. Just what sort of person are you?" Wei Ying raised a brow, "What sort of person could I be? I'm a man." Lanzon lashed out, "You have no shame." Wei Ying, "So I have to feel ashamed about this? Don't tell me you've never read something like this before. I won't believe you." After trying to hold it back for a while, Lanzon charged over with his sword, face cold as frost. Wei Ying was astonished. "What, you're really gonna fight?" He attacked as well. Just like this, the two really began to spar within the library pavilion. At this point, Wei Wuxian exclaimed with a huh. He turned sideways to look at Lan Wangji, musing, "Is this what happened? Why don't I remember us actually fighting back then?" Lan Wangji didn't make a single sound. Wei Wuxian looked at him, but he unnoticeably averted Wei Wuxian's gaze. The feeling that something had been off about him tonight deepened within Wei Wuxian. Just as he was about to ask, he heard young Wei Ying joke as he fought, "Nice, nice, nice. Firm yet free, curb after release, beautiful swordsmanship. But Lanzon, oh, Lanzon, look at how red your face is. Is it because of fighting with me, or is it because of what you just looked at?" Young Lanzon wasn't blushing at all. He swung his sword across, "Nonsense." Wei Ying leaned backwards with extreme flexibility to dodge the attack. Then he straightened up and nimbly pinched Lanzon's fair cheek. "How was it nonsense? You should feel yourself. Your face is almost burning, haha." Lanzon's face switched between red and white. He was just about to slap the hand away when Wei Ying retreated first. His slap landed on nothing as he almost ended up slapping himself. Turning around, Wei Ying continued with all the ease, "Lanzon, oh, Lanzon, no offense, but look at the other people your age. Is there any one of them who blushes so easily? Can't take it after just this tiny bit of thrill, you're such an amateur." If this situation was neither something that really happened nor one of his dreams, it had to be one of Lan Wangji's dreams. Wei Wuxian enjoyed the spectacle. "Lanzon, you get me so much. This is indeed something I say." Yet, he didn't notice that the current Lan Wangji almost looked somewhat anxious. "Over there," Wei Ying rambled on, "copying scriptures is so boring. Why don't I teach you about these things while you copy them? Let's just say it's to thank you for supervising me." Having endured his blather for so long, Lanzon finally couldn't take it any longer. Baiken zipped forward. The two swords clashed, and both were knocked out the window. Seeing that Suobian fell out of his hand, Wei Ying was slightly surprised. "Hey, my sword!" As he shouted, he was about to leap out the window and grab his sword when Lanzon plunged toward him from behind and pushed him onto the ground. Wei Ying's head bumped against the ground. He hastily began to struggle, and the two quickly became a brawling mess. Wei Ying kicked as hard as he could, elbows thrashing, but he couldn't break free from the constraint of Lanzon's limbs no matter what, almost as if he was wrapped inside an impenetrable net of iron. "Lanzon! What are you doing, Lanzon?" I'm kidding. Why are you so serious?" Lanzon grabbed his wrists, pressing his body onto his back. His voice was low. "What, did you want to teach me?" His tone sounded cold, but it seemed volcanoes were about to erupt within his eyes. They were originally quite matched in terms of skill. Out of carelessness, Wei Ying had been pinned down on the ground, vulnerable. He could only feign ignorance. "No? Did I say something?" "Lanzon, you did not?" Wei Ying replied with confidence, "I didn't." He began again, "Don't be so straight, Lanzon, don't take every single thing I say so seriously. I can't fathom how you'd believe all that nonsense. What's there to be angry about? I'll stop, alright? Hurry up and let me go. I haven't even finished copying today's scriptures. I'll quit, I'll quit. Hearing this, Lan Xan's face calmed as he seemed to relax his arms slightly. Yet, right after Wei Ying pulled his wrists out, he grinned mischievously and struck with his palm. However, almost as if he was long since on guard, Lan Xan caught Wei Ying the moment he attacked, holding him down once more. This time, he went even harder, and Wei Ying's wrist was twisted into an even greater curvature. He exclaimed, "I already said I was kidding. Lan Xan. Can't you even take a joke?" Flames seemed to dance within Lan Xan's eyes. Without saying anything, he tore off the ribbon on his forehead and wrapped it thrice around the hands of Wei Ying, who was underneath him, locking them in place with a fast knot. With such a turn of events, Wei Wuxian was absolutely dumbfounded, watching from the side. A few moments later, he finally turned around to look at Lan Wangji beside him, only to find that although Lan Wangji's face was still snowy white, tinged with not a single trace of red, his earlobes had already become pink. Wei Wuxian slithered over, "Up to no good, Lan Erjij. Something seems to be wrong with this dream of yours, huh?" Lan Wangji suddenly stood up, "Stop looking." Wei Wuxian immediately grabbed him, who was just about to get up and leave. "Don't go. I still want to see what would happen in your dream. We haven't even arrived at the best part yet, have we?" By the desk in the library pavilion, Wei Ying howled for a while, tied up by Lan Xan. After he quieted down, he tried to reason with the other. "Lan Xan, a gentleman uses his tongue instead of his fists. You'd be narrow-minded if you're like this. Think about it. Did I say anything about you?" Lan Xan breathed soundlessly, his voice cold. "Think on your own, what you said about me." Wei Ying protested, "I only said that you were an amateur, that you didn't know about some things. Isn't it the truth? There are some adult things that you really don't understand, right? Treating me like this just because you were exposed, what could you be if not narrow-minded?" Lan Xan was indifferent. "Who said I do not understand?" Wei Ying raised a brow, smirking, "Oh, really? Stop being so stubborn. It'd be beyond mind-blowing if you actually do. Ha 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 ha. Ah!" He suddenly exclaimed, for Lan Xan suddenly gripped a part of him down below. Lan Xan's handsome yet still somewhat callow features were cold as he repeated, "Who said I do not understand?" Wei Wuxian clung on to Lan Wangji, almost biting his earlobe. "Yeah, who said you didn't understand? What you think about in the day you dream about at night? Lan Xan, tell me the truth, you really want to do this to my past self, don't you? I can't believe that you're this kind of Han Guangjun." Although Lan Wangji was still expressionless, the pink had already snuck up to his fair neck. The fingers resting at his knee also curled up unnoticeably. Over there, with his manhood having been seized, young Wei Ying gasped a few times, "What the hell are you doing, Lan Xan? Are you mad?" Lan Xan's entire body had already jammed between Wei Ying's legs. Such a position indeed made one feel threatened. Seeing his disadvantage, Wei Ying immediately changed his words, "No, no, no. Nobody said you didn't understand. LLL, let go of me first, let's talk things over." He swung his arms agitatedly, but the Gusulansek's forehead ribbon was made of fine cloth. No matter how he floundered about, he couldn't break out of the bondage. With a few more swings, he saw the book that landed nearby and grabbed it immediately, throwing it onto Lan Xan in hope that the holy illustrations would knock him sober. "Calm down first." The book first crashed into Lan Xan's chest before it landed between Wei Ying's wide-open legs, flipping a few pages. Lan Xan looked down, and he could no longer move his eyes. Coincidentally, the page just so happened to land on an illustration that depicted an extremely obscene position in an extremely bold way. On top of that, both of the illustrated figures were men. Wei Wuxian remembered that the collection he showed Lan Wangji back then had nothing to do with cut sleeves, so there definitely wasn't such a page. He couldn't help but once again marvel at this. The details within Lan Wangji's dream were so comprehensive that he could almost gasp in admiration. Lan Xan looked down, staring at the page without a single blink. Wei Ying saw the illustration as well. Immediately, he felt a bit awkward. He wailed again and again within his heart. Insisting that actions were more powerful than words, he used all his strength to pull out a foot and kick forward. Yet, with only one hand, Lan Xan grabbed the backside of his knee and opened his legs into a wider position. He stripped Wei Ying's belt and trousers with just a few motions. Wei Ying only felt his bottom half go cold. Looking down, he felt as if his heart went cold as well, exclaiming, "What are you doing, Lan Xan?" Over at the side, Wei Wuxian was absolutely engrossed as he watched, so excited that he shouted in silence, "What do you think? He's gonna do you." Stripped of his pants, Wei Ying's legs, slim and white, were stark naked as he kicked them around. Lan Xan pressed his legs down. Referring to the illustrations, his right hand searched for the tight, fleshy spot within the two snowy cheeks. Wei Ying's entire lower half was restrained firmly. Even when such a private region was forcefully touched, he had nowhere to hide. With 2 fingers, Lan Xan rubbed the pink spot. Wei Ying shivered. A flash of embarrassment buzzed across his face, yet he forced it down and struggled as hard as he could, writhing madly. The youth on top of Wei Ying, however, continued to massage the region calmly with his right hand, eyelids lowered and lips sealed shut. Slowly, he exerted more strength, until the spot gradually softened. From the rubbing, a pink slit opened slightly, swallowing a small segment of the fair finger almost shyly. Wei Wuxian glanced at Lan Wangji with a smirk, "So this is why you refused to come in here earlier on, Han Guangjun, to do such a thing to me in your dream and have it seen by me. You're really gonna want to go hide in a hole, huh?" Lan Wangji sat straight by his side. He looked down, and his eyelashes seemed to tremble. Resting his chin on his hand, Wei Wuxian faced the scene, watching his young self be pinned down fingered by a young Lan Xan. He grinned, "If you were able to dream about it afterwards, Han Guangjun, you should have just did it to me back then." Before he could finish, Lan Wangji grabbed his hands and pushed him onto the ground, covering his lips with his own. Wei Wuxian could feel his boiling cheeks as well as the fiercely beating heart within his chest. He found it somewhat amusing. As the moist lips parted, he murmured, "What, embarrassed again?" Lan Wangji's breaths were abnormally rough. He didn't answer. "Wei Wuxian, are you hard instead?" At the same time, Wei Ying let out a long, crying moan by the desk. Lan Xan had already leaned his entire body on top of Wei Ying. The two were tightly connected below, clearly in the process of intrusion. As the hard, foreign object penetrated his body bit by bit, Wei Ying felt so uncomfortable that both his legs curled up, yet because his hands were tightly bound by the forehead ribbon, he couldn't move at all. In pain, he slammed his head loudly against the wall a few times. Lan Xan put his hand under Wei Ying's head to act as cushion. At the same time, he sent his member entirely inside Wei Ying's body. In the beginning, it was difficult for the fleshy spot to even take in a single finger, yet now it was stretched open with a large object both hot and hard. The delicate creases were also spread smooth. Wei Ying was still somewhat dazed, as if he didn't know what was going on. But when Lan Xan slowly began to thrust, consulting the illustrations, Wei Ying began to let out soft, subconscious whimpers. Wei Wuxian turned to Lan Wangji, "You were small back then, Lan Xan, but your size definitely wasn't. I am a virgin, after all, so I say this is gonna be a rough round." He spoke as he rubbed and nudged his knees against Lan Wangji's legs on purpose. Now that he'd seen with his own eyes a live session with him being the protagonist, he was very much turned on and wanted to experience the prowess of the erection again. Before long, Lan Wangji ripped apart his trousers and the lower hem of his clothes without saying a word, while Wei Wuxian naturally parted his legs and coiled them around his waist. Lan Wangji held the shaft of his erection and kneaded it against the entrance. The two made love almost every single day. Both Wei Wuxian's body and heart were long since acquainted with Lan Wangji's. He hugged Lan Wangji's neck tightly and drew in a deep breath, and he was pierced through by the blade. The entry proceeded quite smoothly. The soft entrance and the warm, moist inside tightly sucked on the intruding object, almost as if he was born to hold the one on top of him. Soon, from where they were connected came moist squelches and the sound of flesh beating flesh. Lan Wangji's member was quite impressive in its weight, and the shape of its shaft also curved slightly upwards. With every thrust, it'd accurately grind against the weakest, most sensitive spot on the inner wall. Every time the spot was hit, it was a whirling wave of pleasure for the both of them. Wei Wuxian felt lightheaded from Lan Wangji's thrusts, his insides contracting sporadically. He shivered from the top of his head to the tip of his toes, arching his neck with relish. From this angle, he could just barely see the 16-year-old Wei Ying of Lan Wangji's dream, who was also in the middle of suffering such pleasure. He lay amongst the books scattered on the ground, wrists bound together and weakly fixed above his head. His red ribbon had long since disappeared. Hair disheveled, he was on the verge of crying, tears blurring his squinting eyes. Atop him, Lan Xan worked for a while. As if he thought Wei Ying's legs weren't far enough apart, he held Wei Ying's leg and put it over his shoulder before plunging in again. The leg couldn't hang any longer, and fell to the curve of his elbow. Both the smooth lines of the leg and the muscles at the inner thigh twitched slightly. It was obvious that Wei Ying was also driven mad by the curved, burning objects that drilled through him ceaselessly. This being his first time, he could do nothing but hold tightly onto Lan Xan's shoulders as though he was drowning. He probably couldn't even figure out where he was right now, much less recall that his current agony was afflicted by the one wreaking havoc within his body. As he watched his 16-year-old self blush and tremble while being fucked by the 16-year-old Lan Xan, Wei Wuxian felt that it still wasn't enough. Young Lan Xan should be even rougher, even fiercer, and bully young Wei Ying until he cried out loud. Right now was far from enough. Within the small area of the library pavilion, the two titillating acts played out. Wei Ying, who had been feeling quite hazy, seemed as if he was somewhat brought back by the sounds of the slapping meat. Staring at the ceiling of the library pavilion, he shivered before he slowly shifted his gaze down, as though he wanted to see what the situation below his body was like but didn't have the courage to do so. Coincidentally, after Lan Xan toiled for a while, he raised both of Wei Ying's thighs and hung them at his shoulders. After he leaned forward and charged again, Wei Ying's waist was bent into a flexible curvature. Through the blur of the tears, he could see what it was like between his buttocks. The clean little spot of pink was now a ripe shade of deep red from the work of Lan Xan's member, its edges so swollen that it almost seemed pitiful. The weapon, long and hard, was still thrusting in and out. The milky secretion, the thin streaks of blood, and a clear fluid of unknown origin swished around where the two connected, making a mess of things. And in the front, his own member was also raised slightly, spouting some white at its head. Seeing the horror, Wei Ying was shocked speechless. Soon, he suddenly struggled as hard as he could, conjuring up all his strength, and fought out of Lan Xan's grip. Flipping around, he crawled forward on his knees, wanting to escape. For a long while he'd been fucked roughly, breast on the ground. He'd long since lost all energy. His thighs and his knees quivered as he fumbled only a bit forward before he straight up collapsed on the ground. The position displayed his round, snowy buttocks high in the air. White and red instantly dribbled out of the opening, rolling down the thighs. Inside the thighs was covered with red and purple handprints, able to induce one's sadism with just one look. And all of this fell right inside the eyes of Lan Xan right behind him. With searing eyes, he chased after him without saying a word. Wei Ying felt something tighten around his waist. He was locked in place, and the place that had been empty for a few seconds was immediately filled again. He moaned, whispering, "No." Having endured so much torment, he was already soft and slick, easily able to swallow whole the erection that had just been violating him. Wei Ying grovelled on the mat, his body shifting forward with each thrust. Terror flashed across his face. In the past, when he went out into the mountains to fool around, he always saw beasts mate in this position. And thus, being entered from behind, it was only natural he felt even more embarrassed, his insides clenching tight. Pinching his waist, Lan Xang fucked even harder, still without any method. After a while at such a level of intensity, Wei Ying finally couldn't take it any longer. Half his face and his upper body were pressed down on the ground with extreme force. He rambled incoherently, spare me, spare me. Lan Xang, second young master Lan, spare me. Apart from bringing about deeper and faster dives, of course this kind of plea was utterly useless. Wei Wuxian laughed, good heavens, I'm almost gonna get hard. Please don't spare him no matter what. The right thing to do is to fuck him all the way. Ah! Lan Wangji picked him up so that Wei Wuxian sat on him. The weight of his body made Wei Wuxian swallow the rod even deeper, so deep that his brows knit together and his face twitched slightly. He quickly diverted his attention to riding Lan Wangji, adjusting his position. He no longer had the spare energy to spout shameless comments. As the squelches and the sounds of body slapping against body became even louder, Wei Ying's cries also became more miserable. Lan Xang. Lan Xang. Did you hear me? It's too deep. Don't come in all the way. My stomach hurts. Every time Lan Xang went in, it was as if he was going to pierce him through. The absolute force was the exact opposite of that face of his. Wei Ying was already all red and numb from the onslaught. His entire lower body almost couldn't feel anything anymore. He tried hard to move forward, but every time he'd be dragged back roughly, forced to take Lan Xang's shaft into the depths of his body. With a few such repetitions, he mumbled almost as if he was on his last breath, listen. Listen to me, outside, oh outside there are people waiting for me. Zhang Cheng and the rest are still waiting for me outside. Ah! Hearing this, Lan Xang withdrew from his body all of a sudden and turned him over. Wei Ying let out a tear-streaked whimper and immediately curled into a ball, almost as if he wanted to hide himself like an infant. He was mostly erect at the front, on the verge of coming. Fluids were sprawled across the end of his thigh, trickling down. It was quite the spectacle. The hole that had been forcefully used for so long was swollen, yet it still opened and closed intermittently, seeping white and red. It was as if it was hungry and didn't want Lan Xang to leave his body. Wei Wuxian, on the other hand, had his waist and hips be supported by Lan Wangji as he rode atop his body. Even now, Lan Wangji's face was cold and elegant. If not for his somewhat scattered breathing, it was impossible to tell what he was doing just by looking at his face. It would be even harder to guess that right now, he cupped Wei Wuxian's buttocks with both hands as he squeezed and kneaded without at all controlling his force, leaving blue and purple prints on the two round halves. He then lowered his head and held the spot of red at Wei Wuxian's left chest into his lips, nipping gently. As Wei Wuxian swallowed his member in and out, the wet, purplish rod disappeared again and again into the deep crevice. It felt so good his scalp tingled. Over there, Lan Xang stared for a while at Wei Ying, who seemed like he was about to pass out. Suddenly, he tore apart the clothes in front of him and pinched the pink at his left chest before burying into his body again. Wei Ying finally got the time to catch his breath. Right now, his entire body was sensitive to an extreme. How could he be treated like this? With a whimper, his insides squeezed tight. Tears immediately rolled down. It seemed as if Lan Xang was angry at the two butts on his chest, rubbing and pinching them so hard that they were erect and swollen red. Every time he was touched, Wei Ying's inner walls contracted fiercely. The warm, delicate flesh sucked the blade tightly, perfectly outlining the shape of Lan Xang. Wei Ying cried, Lan Xang, I was wrong, I was wrong. I shouldn't have called you an amateur, I shouldn't have said you didn't understand, I won't teach you anymore. Lan Xang, did you hear me? Second young master Lan urged. Hearing the sweet, nasal tone of the last word, Lan Xang's motions slowed slightly. He indeed showed some mercy. With blurred eyes, he drew towards Wei Ying's face and gently kissed his thin, pleading lips. Wei Ying felt as though his entire lower body had been crushed by a boulder. He felt searing hot down below and sore around his waist, while his nipples were still being teased. He was just starting to drift off when he suddenly felt the attacks below him slow down somewhat. The two's foreheads bumped against each other as two cold lips approached. They tasted a bit sweet. He opened his eyes. As he saw how Lan Xan's long, dark eyelashes were less than an inch away as he kissed him dedicatedly, he somehow felt a tinge of comfort. And so, Wei Ying opened his mouth as well, sucking on Lan Xan's lips softly. He murmured, "I want more." What he meant was the kiss, yet Lan Xan understood him wrong, increasing speed. Wei Ying gasped a few times. He quickly hugged his neck and took the initiative in the kiss. In the beginning, Wei Ying only thought that it was absolutely terrifying for such a long, hard object to jab around his insides. But after so long, he also discovered a sensation apart from soreness, pain, and fatigue, gradually getting aroused. Especially when Lan Xan's somewhat curved erection pressed hard against a certain spot inside him, it felt as if currents passed through his entire body, sending so much pleasure that he trembled. He got harder and harder in front, secreting more and more of the white fluid. He couldn't control his body from moving his hips. Sometimes when even Lan Xan didn't hit the right spot, he'd send his lower half forth and try his hardest to accommodate. What went out of his mouth also ceased to be please. Wei Ying, Gij. Lan Gij. PL. Please. Lan Xan caught his breath, his voice deep, "What?" Wei Ying cupped his cheeks and kissed unstoppably, whispering, "Do it up there, just like before, hit that spot, all right?" As he wished, Lan Xan ground his hips in the direction he wanted. These few thrusts seemed especially heavy. Wei Ying cried in surprise, limbs wrapping around his body as he called, "What?" Lan Xan had already blocked his lips, concentrating on the kiss. Wei Wuxian also lingered in the kiss with Lan Wangji, his tongue sketching the outline of the other's lips. Hearing what happened over there, Wei Wuxian spoke, "Han Guangjun, you came over there." A sweaty Lan Xan embraced a similar Wei Ying, lying quietly on the mat that had already been wrinkled. Wei Ying's chest heaved up and down, his eyes still somewhat hazy. The two hadn't parted yet. He was still sucking tightly on Lan Xan's member. The semen was sealed tightly inside and not a single drop had leaked. Wei Wuxian grinned, "Look over here. Shouldn't we also?" Lan Wangji nodded and laid him flat on the mat. Hips steady, he lunged a few times before letting it out inside Wei Wuxian's body. Wei Wuxian let out a breath of relief. It felt wonderful, yet his back and buttocks weren't made of steel. After messing about for so long, watching the two younger ones, he was pretty much drained of all energy. Yet, Lan Wangji didn't pull out just yet. Instead, still inside of him, he adjusted him into another position. Wei Wuxian, Han Wang. Jun? Lan Wangji let out a small smile. He approached his ear and said a few soft words. Wei Wuxian, wait. By fuck him all the way, I meant for the young Lan Xan in your dream to fuck the me in the dream all the way? I didn't mean. Lan Xan? Ge. Spare me. In Chapter